you to understand in your journey later, when you're trying to grow your bulletproof vest and when you're trying to grow your frameworks, what your enemies are. Who are you fighting really in this journey, and what are the weapons you have at your disposal to fight your enemies? And we talk about the processes here, but I want to go deeper into defining what this weapon really is, what those enemies really are. So here's where you should be at this moment. You should have completed the first module of phase 2 and completely understand how emotions and the bulletproof vest works. Especially, I want you to understand the difference between the thriving and the surviving mindset, because that technique of the difference of surviving versus thriving mindset, we're going to be referencing that quite a bit here. So if you don't understand that, you're going to be very lost in this module. And number 2, where you should be here is that you should understand also that growing your bulletproof vest must require that you learn many new paradigms first. So we're not trying to do all these quick fix tactics like breathing and stuff like that. We're not trying to do that. We're not trying to meditate. We're not trying to journal. We have to learn how to see the world from a different paradigm. And then we need to learn how to program those paradigms into your mind later. And number 3, you should also understand here that being untethered and being bulletproof is an absolute crucial first step if you want to begin creating safety and playing out the frameworks properly. You have to be untethered first, and you have to be bulletproof if you want to look at how can I talk, interact properly, and actually create safety in my relationship, climb a mountain, etc. So this phase might seem a bit slow to you, and we're not getting to the meat of things, but I really want you to understand how important this phase really is. And so here's what we'll discuss in this module. Number 1, the war against entropy and confirmation bias. So this section will outline for you the enemy that you'll be fighting during this journey. And again, it's not your partner. Number 2, I want to talk to you about chain reactions and feedback loops. And so this section, this is not the enemy. This is going to introduce to you the weapon that you will use to fight the enemy. Number 3, your weapons and your enemies, showing you how your weapons and enemies will come together and giving you a realistic view of how your battle, your war, as you're trying to save your relationship here will look like. And finally, we're going to talk about winning the war. And this is about building your initial core set of paradigm shifts based on your new understanding of entropy, confirmation bias, feedback loops, and chain reactions that you learn in this module. So again, if you're asking what part of my mental map should I focus on for this module, bucket 2. You'll be learning a lot of different paradigm shifts and detailed key reinterpretations to build your bulletproof vest on. So again, let's start here with the war against entropy and confirmation bias. And I want to start this by defining to you what entropy really is. So a lot of you who may not have done well in physics class may not understand what this word means. But entropy basically is a natural law that states that over time, the universe tends towards chaos, towards disorder, towards disorganization. So for example, you look at a car and a car breaks down, your car goes through wear and tear. That's entropy. Entropy is things getting into chaos, things getting into disorder. In this case, the mechanics, the atoms, the parts intermingling together are getting into chaos, getting into more disorder, and thus your car is breaking down. Or you look at, let's say, water turning from water into gas. That's entropy. So, the atoms kind of spread about. That's entropy. It becomes more messy, more disordered. Shoes, you wear your shoes and it becomes worn over time. That's entropy too. Your room eventually getting messier and messier over time. That's also entropy. So really, and the thing I want to address here is a lot of you may be thinking that, hey, Jeff, I thought entropy only applied to physics. I thought it applied to physical matter when you're melting stuff, when, you're talking about energy being lost. And when you talk about energy being lost in a system, for example. Well, that's actually not true. The truth is, the whole universe, even relationships, is governed by entropy. And it's something that can not only be proven scientifically, but you can also mathematically prove that entropy governs the whole universe. It's not just about physics or in your science class. This really applies to everything. And the successful here really understand this, and the failures are very ignorant of this. So to give you a quick mathematical example, imagine here that you bought a 6,000 piece puzzle. And you open this box And of course, when you open the box, the puzzle is unsolved. And you dump all the puzzle pieces into a big table. What are the odds that when you dump all those puzzle pieces, that the puzzle will solve itself? The odds are about 1 in infinity. Right? So in that case, when you toss that big 6,000 piece of puzzle onto your big table, you basically have one variation of order, and you have infinite variations of disorder. Now let's look at a sandcastle. Let's say you went on a vacation, and you go to the beach, and you build a really big, nice sandcastle like this. Now, let's say it's late, it's getting dark, and you go back to your hotel room. What are the odds that the next day, the sandcastle will look exactly like how it looks like today? Exactly like how it looks like today. The answer again is 1 out of infinity. I mean, it's extremely unlikely that not even 1 grain of sand is going to move. So that sandcastle right now has 1 variation of order and infinite variations of disorder. Now let's look at your relationship. Again, your relationship is the same thing. For every interaction you have, right, there's 1 or very few variations of order. But for every 1 variation of order, not to say that you can only say 1 thing that's correct. I mean, there's so many ways you can do correct things. But what I'm saying is that with 1 variation of the right thing you say, the right thing you do, there's also millions of the wrong things you can do. Again, for every variation of order, there are infinite variations of disorder, even in your relationship. So, to summarize here, for everything in this universe, whether you're talking about thoughts, right? For thoughts, you have 1 variation of order and infinite variations of disorder. You're talking about matter, physical goods, like the sandcastle, relationships, emotions, decisions, whatever. For all these things, you have 1 variation of order. And for every variation of order, you have infinite variations of disorder. And so when you look at how the universe is designed heavily biased towards disorder than order. If you look at the law of equilibrium, the law of probability, if let's say the probability of a disorder happening is infinite, or a really big number, and a variation of order is 1, then the law of probability states that it will go towards that state of disorder. The same way, if you have a 1 million chance of not winning a lottery and a 1 chance of winning a lottery, you're probably not going to win the lottery. So if left to its own devices and due to the law of probability, the world will always fall into a state of chaos and disorder. And that's the essence of entropy. So entropy is not just a physical principle, it's also a mathematical principle. It's how our universe mathematically governs itself. And this includes thoughts, emotions, matter, life, relationships, etc. again. So it's not just about what you learn in science class. This applies to everything in life. So if you're thinking right now, okay, Jeff, what are you talking about? What is the point of all this? Don't overcomplicate this. Right? We'll talk about the implications of this later on in this module, later on in this phase, and the rest of the program as well. For now, I just want you to have 1 key takeaway. And the key takeaway I want you to have is that anything in life, and this includes, again, your thoughts, relationships, emotions, etc., will naturally degrade, will naturally fall into chaos, will naturally get more disordered when left to its own devices. So I want you to just take a moment here. Maybe you pause this video, maybe you take a walk somewhere, and just spend a minute to really think about how this applies to your life, how everything in your life, for everything you see in life, there's only 1 variation of order and infinite variations of disorder. And now, really serious, really think about this, and you will see, and you will start to understand how this is really how the universe runs itself. You will really start to see this. And once you really feel this, once you have a deeper understanding of this, I want you to place this into bucket 2 of your mental map. as the new sub-bullet. So you should have a bullet point in your mental map that says right now, implications of entropy. That's it. Or meaning of entropy, or just entropy. Then below it, you have the principles behind it, the philosophy behind it, the implications behind it, which we'll add to later on. Now that's entropy. So let's talk about the second part here, which is what is confirmation bias? So confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, to interpret, to favor, and to recall information in a way that confirms one's pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses. And a lot of us may have learned this in school, where we talk about confirmation bias, how whenever we do research, for example, we want to research not just the things that fit our theory, but try to research differing point of views as well, and not just look for information that fits our existing beliefs. But I want to go deeper into this definition of confirmation bias. And I want to explore it from different angles here. And I want you to start visualizing confirmation bias in many different ways. Let's start here with Watson's 246 test. And this Watson's 246 test will really show you the nature of how confirmation bias really works, how it operates, how the mechanics of how it forms. So the Watson's 246 test is actually quite simple. This is an actual test that was done, and in the test, the scientists got together probably 35 participants. And these participants all were given 3 numbers first. The 3 numbers are 2, 4, and 6. And the main question here is, what is the rule, the mathematical rule, that governs these 3 numbers, 2, 4, and 6? And so if you were to take a quick guess, you could say, okay, 2, 4, and 6, it could be increasing by 2, because 2 plus 2 plus 2 is 2, 4, 6, or it could be even numbers as well. Those could be 2 potential rules that governs the 3 numbers. So their job, the objective, is to guess the rule that governs the 3 numbers, the 2, 4, 6. But the method they do it with is you have to find this rule by giving your own set of 3 numbers that you think fits the rule. So it's almost like 20 questions, where if you, let's say, think the rule is even numbers, and you want to get to confirm that rule, you could potentially say, what about the numbers 8, 10, 12? Right? Because those are even numbers. Or you could say 4, 6, 8 if you think it's increasing by 2, or 4, 16, 20 if you think it's even numbers. Once you give your new set of 3 numbers, the moderator will then tell you if those numbers fits the rule or not. So basically, I'll say, what about 4, 6, 8? Then the moderator will say, yeah, that fits my rule. Or no, that doesn't fit my rule. And based on the responses you get, whether the 3 numbers you gave fits your rule or not, and what the moderator says, you will then try to state your guess eventually, right, of what the rule is. So maybe you seem confused, I don't know, but here's a great real-world example of this test in action right here. So I'm going to show you a video here of a guy who actually does this test with normal people, unexpected people.
I'm going to give you guys 3 numbers, a 3-number sequence, and I have a rule in mind that these 3 numbers obey. And I want you to try to figure out what that rule is. But the way that you can get information is by proposing your own set of 3 numbers, to which I will say, yes, that follows my rule, or no, it doesn't follow my rule, and then you can propose what you think the rule is. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so here are the 3 numbers. 2, 4, 8.
2, 4, 8.
You don't need to continue the sequence. You can propose a totally different sequence, whatever you want to propose, and I will simply say yes or no, that follows my rule.
2, 4, 8. 16, 32.
16, 32, and
64.
Those also follow my rule.
Okay.
What's the rule? What are you thinking?
Multiply by 2.
That is not my rule.
What?
That's not my rule. But you're allowed, if you want, propose 3 other numbers.
3, 6, 12.
3, 6, 12.
3, 6, 12 follows my rule.
10, 20, 40.
10, 20, 40.
That follows the rule.
Yeah, I'm still multiplying by 2.
I know.
Oh.
I know what you're doing. And yes, it follows my rule, but no, it's not my rule.
5, 10,
10 and 20.
Follows my rule.
100,
200, 400.
Follows my rule.
500, 1,000, 2,000.
Follows my rule.
Want me to keep going?
But do I just keep going? You're going to tell me your rule? Or
Am I doing it the wrong way? Am I approaching this the wrong way?
You're totally fine,
Okay.
but you're approaching it the way most people approach it. Like, think strategically about this. You want information.
Yeah.
I have information. The point of the three numbers, right, is to allow you to figure out what the rule is.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to give you the numbers that I don't think fits the sequence and then see what you say. So I'll say 2, 4, 7.
Fits my rule.
So whatever I propose is right?
So is your rule like you can propose any number?
So the rule is anything we say is yes.
No.
Damn it.
But you are on the right track now. Hit me with three numbers.
3, 6, 9.
Follows my rule.
Oh, that didn't follow my rule.
This is good, right?
5, 10, 15.
That follows my rule.
What? Oh. Really?
Yeah.
I don't believe this.
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
Follows the rule.
What about 7, 8, 9?
Follows. Yes, that follows the rule.
8, 16, 39.
Fits the rule.
Excellent.
But we're no closer to the rule. I want you to get to the rule.
How about 1, 7, 13?
Follows the rule.
What?
11, 12, 13.
How does this
Follows
make
the rule.
sense?
10,
I don't
9,
know how
8.
to do this.
Does not follow the rule.
10, 9, 8 does not.
Oh, so is it all in ascending order?
Booyah.
Okay.
Up top. Yes, first
that
ones
what it
to get
is?
it. You guys nailed it. That's the rule. That's
so
the rule. Increase numbers in increasing order.
Aw.
Numbers in ascending order.
Oh, so much.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 15, 25. Doesn't matter. Any numbers in ascending order.
Now, what's interesting is, in that video you saw, very few people actually solved it. And when they do solve it, it's because they were given a lot of feedback, a lot of help along the way. In the actual test conducted by Watson, only 20% of people were able to get to the right rule. Only 20%. So what's happening here? Why is it so difficult to figure out the right rule? And how can so many smart people get it wrong? And the answer really is that most of us, when testing a theory, we only try to confirm a hypothesis. So if that doesn't make sense, let me clarify. This is what we do. So let's say your initial hypothesis when you get this game is that the rule is increasing by 2. And you actually saw the people in that video doing the same thing. So let's say you started with the hypothesis of increasing by 2. Your first guess here is going to be, let's say, 4, 6, 8. The moderator will say, yeah, it fits my rule. And after that first try, the confidence in your hypothesis could be 20%. Then you try the second guess. The second guess, you also trying to confirm that initial hypothesis increasing by 2. So you say 10, 12, 14. Say, fits the rule? Yeah. Okay, great. I'm even more confident. Then you give another set of 3 numbers that actually fits the rule of increasing by 2. Yes, it fits my rule. You even get even more confident and more confident and more confident. Or if your hypothesis says even numbers, you kind of do the same thing. You just give a ton of even numbers. Each time the moderator says, yes, that fits my rule, you feel more confident, more confident, more confident. Right? You saw this is how the people were guessing. So again, we subconsciously and naturally tend to ask questions that attempt to confirm our hypothesis. And the more confirmations we get on these questions, the more confident we become of our hypothesis. But like we saw in that test, this is a very false confidence. Right? The confidence that a lot of people had to their rule, their hypothesis, and whenever they get these confirmations, they get more big-headed. They were actually going in the wrong direction, but they never even imagined they were going in the wrong direction. So in life, we don't guess numbers. But let's say if your hypothesis here is that you cannot trust your partner, then the way you question the world is that you will question it by asking, why can't I trust my partner? And you will naturally seek confirmations of why you can't trust your partner. And if your hypothesis right now is that your partner will never change, Maybe your partner's hypothesis of you is that you will never change. Then the way you or your partner will question the world, and thus the answers you get, the confirmations you get eventually, will be based on the question, why can't my partner ever change? Now, if your hypothesis here is that there's no hope for the relationship, and your partner's hypothesis about you and the relationship is that there's no hope for the relationship, then the question you will ask is, why is there no hope for the relationship? And the answers you get will be about that as well. So once we form a hypothesis, our human brain is geared to only ask questions that confirm that hypothesis. This biases the nature of the questions we ask, and thus this will also bias the types of answers we get. This is the mechanics of confirmation bias in yourself and in your partner. So it's not that you're consciously trying to select information or be selective. It's that you're subconsciously just geared to ask different kinds of questions, very biased questions. And once you get very biased questions, you get biased answers. But you think these biased answers are the right answers. That's your definition of the truth, your definition of reality. And we are helpless against this. This is just how our minds are naturally programmed. Now, there are two other ways that we can visualize and understand confirmation bias here. So here's another way. So let's say you have this big system of concentric circles. This gray one, the big one on the outside, is really the universe of possible knowledge that you can have. Now, all the ones that are in pink, whether they're the ones inside the yellow or outside the yellow, they're going to be the wrong answers. And these blue ones, the few blue ones, are going to be the right answers. Right? This is nature of entropy. For every variation of order, there's infinite variations of many variations of this order. And the yellow here is where we look. Okay? So when presented with a challenge, with a question, maybe we're confused about something, the questions that we tend to ask confines us to the yellow. So essentially, we form this box in our head. Just like the people in that study form a box. Okay, if my objective here is to guess the rule, the mathematical rule, let me start by confining the list of potential rules that I think could be. So then you start to say, okay, the two potential rules could be even numbers or multiply by 2. And so maybe you come up with other answers here. Maybe you come up with a set of 4 or 5 or 6, whatever it is. But when you do that, what we're doing is we're forming this box, we're forming this bubble of, okay, here's the realm of possible answers. And in this bubble is going to be these data points on all the possible answers that we can have. And when we ask questions, we're trying to figure out which of the answers, which of the hypotheses, which of the data points in the bubble that we've formed is correct. And even though all the answers within the yellow area is wrong, you will try still find the right in it anyways. You will build this conviction over something that's false and think that you've done your research and conviction is justified. So again, when you form this box and you form the list of possible answers, what you're doing here really is that you're trying to figure out which of the answers within the yellow box is the most right answer. And because you're asking questions, because you're researching which of the answers in the box is correct, you're going to think that, oh, I've done my research and I know what I'm talking about. You feel like your conviction is justified, just like how the people in those studies, their conviction feels very justified. They feel like they have the right answer. They feel like they're like whatever answers could not be. They get really confused. How could it be? I don't know this is crazy. But in reality, you are no closer to the right answer because the answer was not in the yellow area in the first place. So this hypothetic thinking that we have is a problem when there is no blue in the yellow, when there are no right answers in your box, when the right answers actually lie outside your box. And this is why the people in the Watson's 246 test found it so difficult to find the right answer, even though it was so obvious, because the answer was never in that box that they formed. But the problem here is that in life, there's no one there, there's no moderator there to help you get to the right answers, right? There's no moderator to say like, no, that's the wrong answer. So most people live a life where they're constantly asking questions that only prove what they currently think is right. Basically, you live in this echo chamber of what you think is right. And this is true for yourself and also for your partner as well. And this is why, again, most people live their whole life never really understanding why they're struggling or failing and blaming all the wrong things for their unhappiness. But the funny thing also is that they don't know they're doing this. They have no idea that they're actually wrong. They live in this conviction that they're actually right because they live in the realm of the yellow. And they pick within the yellow, this tiny yellow circle, what is the most right answer. But they don't understand that the yellow that they have, the yellow that they confine their thinking to, is such a small part of what is the universe of possible knowledge. That the universe of possible knowledge, once they get out of the yellow, they'll realize they have the right answer. But they don't know what they don't know. And they'll never get to find out that they're actually wrong. And they fool themselves into thinking that they're actually done their research, they ask the right questions, but they're actually not right. Now, here's another way to view. Now, again, that seems complicated, but I want you to understand, just have this image in your head for the time being of how confirmation bias is formed. Now, the other way we can visualize confirmation bias here is just look at this piece of toast. What do you see? Probably not much, just a bunch of patterns here and there. Well, what if I told you that a lot of people, they actually see a very subtle image of Jesus on this piece of toast? Pause this video. Can you see it now? I can. And you most likely can too. There's a picture of Jesus kind of on a diagonal. And it's the face of Jesus. I can see it. I can see the eyes, I can see the nose. If you can't see it, let me know. But a lot of you can probably see it. And here what I did was, initially I didn't give you a hypothesis, but then once I gave you the hypothesis that you should be looking for, suddenly you see it. So if you want to see Jesus on a piece of toast, you will see it. Because that's what your brain is looking for. And once you see Jesus, you will keep seeing it and you can no longer unsee it. And this is simply your brain obsessing over the yellow area and wanting to find something that may not be there. This is really the power and the curse at the same time of confirmation bias in action. And so the takeaway I want you to have here is that when you are in the journey of saving your relationship right now, you're fighting some very intense confirmation bias your partner has against you, against the relationship. And the main takeaway that I want you to have here is that if you're on this journey with me of trying to save your relationship, your partner has a very strong confirmation bias going against you, going against the relationship. And your partner right now wants to see and can only see and is questioning the world in a way that can only make her see how she should give up, how she should feel hopeless, how you can't change, how whatever change you have is going to be manipulative, etc., etc., etc. That confirmation bias is very strong. And this is again why we say you cannot afford to make mistakes. Because your partner is already questioning the world in such a way to where she only seeks confirmations of what she believes in, her current hypothesis, which is negative about you and the relationship. And so if you can do 100 things right but one thing wrong, it's the one thing wrong that she'll focus on, not the 100 things that are right. Right? So we have to be really great and perfect in our execution, in our process, in our understanding, in the 4 layers, the 4 pillars, the 3 layers of changes, etc. We have to be really good. We have to have all these things deeply ingrained, deeply programmed in our brains, in our system. But again, don't overcomplicate this. We'll talk about the implications of this later on in this module, in this phase, and in the program. For now, I just want you to have 2 takeaways. Once a belief is formed, you will start to question the world in ways that will tend to confirm your existing belief while ignoring in any and all other possibilities. This is how your confirmation bias works, and also how your partner's confirmation bias works as well. And if you're in the journey right now of trying to save your relationship, you can bet that your partner's existing belief is very negative about you and the relationship. And so she's actively looking for things that support her hypothesis. And confirmation bias will make you feel like you are doing your research and getting the right answers. You will feel this conviction, but you're actually going in the wrong direction. You may actually be going further away from the right answer. So just to spend a minute again to really think about how this applies to your life, how this applies to you, but also how this applies to how your partner sees you right now. Okay? And the implications that has on your journey, on what you do going forward. I mean, really think about this. Go take a walk in the park. Pause this video. Really think about this. And once you really understand this, place this in bucket 2 of your mental map as a new sub-bullet, just like the previous point. Now, the second thing I want us to talk about here is chain reactions and feedback loops. So let's start with talking about what are feedback loops. So feedback loops are very simple. You have an input, or this input, we can call it entity number 1, or the first entity. Now, a feedback loop happens when the input leads to an output, or we can call this output entity number 2. And the output then becomes the new input. And this can feed back on itself, where the input now goes back to the output, input, output, input. It just keeps going. And this can go in the positive direction to form a positive feedback loop. But it can also go in a negative direction, where this is a negative feedback loop. So a great example of this is clapping. If you ever go to a concert, for example, and the person finishes performing, you will start by seeing a few people clapping, maybe 3 people clapping. And then the 3 people clapping, other people see it and then go, oh, it leads to more people clapping. And then more people clapping becomes the new input. Then more people clapping leads to even more people clapping. And before you know it, the whole stadium is clapping. This can go in a positive direction to where more people are clapping, but then eventually a few people stop clapping. Then more people see it. Then more people stop clapping. Before you know it, the whole stadium stops clapping. It can go in a positive feedback loop or a negative feedback loop. Another example of this is your AC. So people using electricity to cool down their homes leads to more greenhouse emissions and global warming. Then the global warming becomes the new input and causes people to use even more electricity. And this can go up as a positive feedback loop or a negative feedback loop. Now, notice here that when we talk about positive feedback loop or negative feedback loop, the word positive does not really relate to whether that's a good thing or bad thing. Right here, there's a positive feedback loop on a bad thing. Okay? When we talk about positive feedback loop, it's either going in a positive direction or a negative direction. Another example of a feedback loop. If you watch any sports, athletics, for example, if a team or a person wins the championship, they win a lot of money. And when they win a lot of money, means that they can hire better people, place more resources to increase their chances of winning more in the future. So they win even more. The more they win, the more money they get. And the more money they get, the more they can hire and become better, the more they win, etc., creating a positive feedback loop. But this also goes in a negative direction, negative feedback loop for the people who are not winning. They're not winning, they get less money, they can't put in resources, they can't win because they don't have resources, and so on and so on. Same thing happens in your relationship. What you do, your actions determine your partner's actions as well. Then your partner's actions determine your actions. And this can go in a positive direction or in a negative direction. And that's just the nature of feedback loops, where an input leads to an output, the output feed back into the input. Or entity 1 influences entity number 2, and number 2 influences number 1, etc., etc., etc. Now again, don't overcomplicate this. This is just to allow you to understand the theory, the principle behind this. And we'll talk about the implications of this later on in this module, phase, and program. For now, I want you to have 4 takeaways on this point. Feedback loops apply to every single thing in your life, even thoughts, matter, events, etc. Feedback loops can occur in your external world. For example, what you do affects your partner, right? The external world outside to you, but it can also happen in your internal world. For example, we'll talk about this concept called the emotional flywheel, where, for example, and we talked about in the last module, this concept of the emotional flywheel, that's a feedback loop that is happening in your internal world, where a negative emotion causes more negative emotions, etc., etc., etc. And feedback loops can never be neutral. It's always either going up or going down, getting better or worse. Because doing nothing even is perpetuating either a positive feedback loop or a negative feedback loop. There is no neutral. You can always either go up or down. Now really think about that, right? Even doing nothing, doing neutral things is not neutral. Doesn't create a neutral feedback loop. And you can never escape the nature of feedback loops. They govern every decision and every microsecond of your life. They govern every single thing in your life. Now just spend a minute to think about how this applies to your life. Now really, really think about this. And when you have thought about this, place this in your bucket 2 of your mental map as a new sub-bullet. Now, when we talk about feedback loops, we also have to talk about the law of exponentiality as well. Now, if feedback loops is a law of nature that applies to every single moment of your life, then feedback loops always 100% leads to exponentiality, either going upwards or downwards. So let me give you some examples of this. The easiest way to illustrate this is with money. So if you take $1 and you compound it with a 10% interest, you get $1.10. Now the $1.10 now becomes the new input. And let's say you get this 10% interest every single day. It compounds daily. So now the $1.10 becomes the new input. Then you build a 10% interest on the $1.10. And this goes up over time. That's how interest works. But nowhere in the world do things compound daily. But you get the point. So here you have a $1 with a 10% interest. Gives you $1.10. And gives you like a 10-cent surplus or addition. But we can keep going here. And we can keep compounding the 10% interest. And if you notice the deltas on the green there, the changes in the green, the changes increase each time. It doesn't increase by just 10 cents every single time. It's not a linear increase, it's an exponential increase. What's interesting though, is that if you do this every day for a year, you will end up with this massively big number. I think that's 1,000 trillion, if I'm not wrong. Or maybe 1 trillion, I'm not sure. But it's a massive number from $1 being compounded 10% every single day. And the curve, if you chart it, looks like this, where nothing really happens for about 300 days. Then everything happens in 30 days. And if you look at net worth of a lot of people, they look the same. And again, I'm using money as an example here, not because I'm money hungry, whatever it is, but it's an exponential growth that we can see, we can witness, we can tangibly see. You know, if I give you an exponential growth on my internal self, my bulletproof vest, you can't see that. It's not going to land properly. So if you look at the net worth of Warren Buffett, it's the same thing. Nothing happened for the first probably 56 years of his life. Then everything happened in the last 10 years, really. Same thing for Musk. Look at Elon Musk. Look at the crazy spike at the end. It's eerily similar. It's uncanny, right? It's so similar, all the curves. Look at Bezos. Same thing. Look at Amazon stock price. Same thing. It's so uncanny, right? And look at my earnings. I mean, my earnings haven't spiked up yet, but, you know, it was nothing for a long time, and then we start to go up. Now let's look at another example of this, which is population. So the number of births per year leads to more population, but the more population we have, the more number of births we have per year. So there's a feedback loop in our population as well. Let's look at our population. Look at how the curve looks literally exactly the same. It's always exponential, up. So the same pattern that feedback loops can lead to exponentiality can go up, but it can also go in a negative direction as well. So, for example, what you do affects what your partner does. And this can go in a positive or negative direction, right? If you do something negative, your partner does something negative. And when your partner does something negative, you do something negative back. This is a negative feedback loop. So again, it can go in a positive direction or in a negative direction. In your relationship, right now, most likely, it's been going in a negative direction for a very, very long time. So again, don't overcomplicate this. We'll talk about the implications of this later on. Just one takeaway for now. Feedback loops always lead to either exponential decline or exponential growth. There's no neutral. Now just spend a minute to really think about how this applies to your life. Really think about it. Really think about how this applies, for example, to the climate versus weather philosophy. Really think about it. And place this in bucket 2 of your mental map as a new sub-bullet. So really think about how this applies to the other parts of your mental map right now. Just look at your mental map and really think about, what other eureka moments can I get from this? Now, I want to introduce to you this concept of the hockey stick effect. So if you look at all these curves that I showed you earlier, it looks like a hockey stick. That looks like a hockey stick. That looks like a hockey stick. And that kind of looks like a hockey stick. This is why we call it this exponential growth. That tipping point where everything becomes exponential. We call that the hockey stick moment, the hockey stick effect. So feedback loops always lead to exponentiality, which always leads to the hockey stick effect. And the hockey stick effect is always marked by a period in which nothing seems to happen. Nothing as in both positive or negative seems to happen. In this case, no negative or no positive is happening, but we know damn sure that if you look closely in there, there is some intense feedback loop going on, right? Now, that dead zone right there, so day 301 before, is the part where most people either give up the processes that lead to positive growth, if they're trying to go in this blue trend here, or it's a time that most people are completely blind and complacent to the negative decline. And then suddenly, things just click. So if you're in the blue trend here, you suddenly see all your results coming into fruition in a very short amount of time. And this is actually, if you look at the stories of all our successful clients, it happens the same thing. Nothing happens for 3, 6 months, a year and a half, then boom, everything just clicks. That's the feedback loop leading to exponentiality, and the exponentiality experiencing the hockey stick effect. Or suddenly, nothing happens, then you feel and experience everything breaking down in a short amount of time. Probably what brought all of you here. So the truth is, what got you to go do the program in the first place was that something really bad happened. That's you at day 325. Things just went poof down. But what you don't know is that the feedback loops, the same feedback loops has been happening for day 324 and before. It's been happening all this time. But you just didn't know it. And so that's what's been happening to you. But the truth is that things have been declining for a while. You just never noticed it. And that's the hockey stick effect. It can go up or down. But the hockey stick effect is always marked by a period in which nothing seems to happen, and then suddenly everything happens, good or bad. Now, last thing on this section is understanding chain reactions in the web of life. So when we talk about chain reactions, really what we're referring to is like the butterfly effect. It's a series of seemingly unrelated events, each caused by the previous one. So, for example, here's an example, a simple example of a chain reaction. Let's say one night you drank too much. Because you drank too much, maybe you forgot to set your alarm when you fell asleep, and so you woke up late. And you woke up late, you missed a very important meeting. Then, because you missed a very important meeting, you got fired. Because you got fired during COVID time or whatever it is, you became homeless. You being homeless started with you drinking too much. But you being homeless really has nothing to do with you drinking too much, but also at the same time, everything to do with it because of a series of chain reactions. Butterfly effect. Now, that's a very simple example. So let's form a more complete picture of chain reactions and feedback loops. I want you, going forward, from this day on, start seeing your life, your whole life, your internal world, your internal emotions, your untetheredness, whatever it is, and your external world as you interact with your partner, your work, whatever it is, as a massive web. So there's two webs. There's an internal web and an external web. The internal web, for example, is your bulletproof vest. The external web, for example, is your events, the outcomes you face. Now, if you look at the internal web here, this web is currently stitched together by various internal factors that all have their own feedback loop. There's a lot of internal processes, and each of those millions of internal processes creates its own feedback loop, tiny little feedback loops. And in this web, how you do one thing essentially affects how you do everything else. And I'll show you an example of what I mean here a bit later. But there's an internal chain reaction that's happening. There's an internal feedback loop between the thing itself, but also the one thing affects another thing, another thing, and another thing. And the quality of your web, your internal web, will determine the outcomes and the circumstances you will get. And this creates an external chain reaction. And each outcome creates its own feedback loop, both internally and externally facing. So again, when an outcome happens, it influences you on the internal side. So there's a loop between the internal and external web, right? But there's also a feedback loop between each of the little stitching here, little parts of your web. You don't just get one outcome, but leads to a chain of reaction of other outcomes, internal and external. So here, you're not just looking at one outcome here, you're looking at a web of outcomes. So what you do one thing right now affects many different things you do going down the line. And this will become a lot more clear as we go on here. But a perfect example of a chain reaction here is this system that we have of this program. So we say, if you go to the program portal, you make your mental map, you follow the process of success, you will master the 4 buckets. Even within the 4 buckets, we say, if you learn the right learning principles, it will make it easier for you to play out the daily practice process, the mindsets and the frameworks. If you play out the right daily practice process, you will master the mindsets and frameworks. If you master the mindset, you will master the frameworks. If you master the frameworks, you will master the 3 layers of changes. If you master the 3 layers of changes, you will master the 5 pillars. Look at that chain. That's a chain reaction right there. This whole program is based on a chain reaction. Now again, don't overcomplicate this. Now, the key takeaways I want you to have here is that every single thing you do, or every single thing that you don't do, you're either perpetuating a positive or negative feedback loop. And this happens whether you're conscious of it or not. And the feedback loop creates other positive or negative chain reactions up and down the mountain. In time, the mountain, the relationship mountain that we talk about, it creates chain reactions. So every single thing you do, every single thought you have, every single thing you will learn, every single thing you implement, they all matter. A lot. Every single thing matters. Because every single moment, again, you're starting a positive or negative loop. You're starting a positive or negative chain reaction. And so one small action, butterfly effect, can really influence many different things down the line. Again, don't overcomplicate this. We'll talk about more about the implications later on. For now, I just want you to have two key takeaways. How you do one thing affects how you do everything else, and will affect the many outcomes you get. Butterfly effect, feedback loops. Never underestimate the power of making one proper change rather than making many wrong changes. Just spend a minute to think about how this applies to your life, to how you learn this program, to how you do your daily practice process, etc. And place it into your bucket too. Now the next section is going to be your weapons and your enemies. So let's understand first the devastating power of feedback loops and chain reactions. So again, you can have a feedback loop, a small feedback loop here on either an internal or external process. Let's set an example of how small this can be. So let's say we can have this feedback loop around the victim mindset. You play victim, which makes you more powerless. As you become more powerless, you will want to feel more like a victim. As you feel more like a victim, you will feel more powerless, etc., etc., etc. Now, think about this. Your whole life is not just one moment in time. Your life is a massive continuum. And each single moment, you're creating feedback loops. So from left to right, this is really a representation of time. So every single micro moment you have in your life, you are either perpetuating a positive loop or a negative loop. Every single moment. You're perpetuating a positive or negative loop internally, or also a positive negative loop externally. I mean, you're constantly thinking, you're constantly having thoughts in your mind, you're constantly having interpretations, paradigm shifts, etc. Right? And each of these feedback loops that you create at every single micro moment creates a chain reaction of other things. And what's also funny is that these chain reactions of other things influences each other as well. Right? So this is really the butterfly effect in action. How you do one thing affects everything else. Now, while all of this can sound deeply overwhelming, and I get it, this chart looks overwhelming, but it has a very simple principle, a very simple message. So it can sound very overwhelming. It may sound like you need to get a gazillion things correct. Well, if everything affects everything, then I gotta get everything right. No, that's not what we're saying. This is actually a really good thing because we're saying here that if everything is interconnected and everything creates a feedback loop to one another, we don't need to focus on 1 million things. We don't. We only need to focus on a few key internal feedback loops to fix, for example, BPV, and we'll fix a ton of other internal ones. So we've fixed, let's say, our victim mindset. It makes it easier for us to learn the program. If we learn the program, it makes it easier for us to become untethered. If we become untethered, it makes it easier for us to master the bulletproof vest. And these are all internal shifts we're talking about. So if you master one internal shift, it makes it easier to master the next internal shift, the next internal shift, the next internal shift, and so on. Again, as you improve one side of your web, it improves the whole web in itself. Everything is interconnected. Right? And as we program the internal shifts and the external shifts, for example, the frameworks and the bulletproof vest, deeply within our processes, so basically here we're changing our defaults. We're changing what we default to when we're tired, when things are tough. Then we will start to create more positive outcomes effortlessly for every single micro decision that we make. And so when we program something in our life like this, every micro decision, whether we're conscious of it or not, we're going to be playing out a more positive loop. That's what we want. Because we're only conscious of 1% of our life, maybe. A lot of the process we have is very subconscious. A lot of the thoughts, the feelings you have, the things you say sometimes even, the words you choose is very subconscious. And so if we only do the right things whenever we are conscious of it, we're only doing the right things for 1% of the time, which is why it's important to really program this stuff into your subconscious. And as these outcomes start improving, they will create a chain reaction on their own and begin to become self-perpetual. And this is again why people can see no results for 3-6 months and suddenly, boom, everything just comes in one time. And as these outcomes start improving, they will create feedback loops that will make it easier for you to do the right things. So let me give you an example. And all this starts with focusing on a few key internal shifts and mastering the few processes to do so. Very simple. So here, the takeaway I want you to have is that these chain reactions and feedback loops are a good thing, because it doesn't mean that you need to get a gazillion things correct. You only need to get the few right things correct. And this few right things creates a feedback loop within itself, but also a chain reaction of getting everything else correct as well. But the opposite applies if you do not master the right process. If you don't know what the right processes are, and you get those processes wrong, then you're going to create a ton of negative chain reactions, negative feedback loops going in downhill, which has been happening to you. And what are the right processes? These are right here. These are the processes. This program is what you need to focus on. You need to master and focus on the process of success. Master the 4 buckets, the 3 layers, the changes, the 5 pillars to get your outcome. If you want the chain reaction, you got to pay attention to this. So feedback loops, chain reactions, and the law of exponentiality can either become your best friend or your worst enemy. What they become is completely up to you. It's a double-edged sword. You can either use it to stab yourself in the head or attack your enemy. What they become is completely up to you. Do you know how to wield feedback loops and chain reactions well or not? That's up to you. Now let's take a moment here to demystify the process of reversing feedback loops. So we talk about, let's say, breaking and reversing negative feedback loops. What does that actually mean? So here, we want to reverse negative loops and chain reactions. Great. How we do that is we want to use the frameworks to externally turn negative into positive. So there's going to be a lot of confirmation bias, a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of negative things happening externally. We want to be able to use the frameworks later on to turn those from negative into positive. Now, going even deeper, we also want to use the BPV then to internally turn a negative to positive. Because if we want to master and execute the frameworks well, we have to be able to internally shift from negative to positive first. So before we can externally turn negative to positive, we need to be able to do that internally first. For example, if let's say there's a conflict happening and your partner brings up a tough truth, it's impossible for you to turn her bringing up something negative from a negative into a positive if you can't even do it yourself, if you panic yourself. And we then need to use untetheredness to internally allow the BPV to form. Without being untethered, we cannot ever become bulletproof. So this is kind of the chain, right? There's a chain reaction itself on how to fix chain reactions. So here again, there's even more deeper parts of this chain. Because if you want to become untethered, you want to master the bulletproof vest, the frameworks, you need buckets 1 and 2. You need to understand the principles and the ammo that allows you to become untethered, that allows you to grow your bulletproof vest, and allows you to know the frameworks. But again, you also need bucket 3. You need a daily practice process that allows you to master the principles you have placed in bucket 1 and 2. But you also need bucket 4. This is for you to properly learn and understand, iterate, and master buckets 1 to 3 of your mental map. This is the system of how you ultimately reverse negative loops and chain reactions and undo entropy, undo confirmation bias. So essentially here, you have 2 opposing forces. You have your positive feedback loops and chain reactions, but then the opposing force of that is going to be entropy and confirmation bias. So, I want you to start thinking of feedback loops and chain reactions as a double-edged sword here. If you know how to wield it and use it properly, it can become a very potent weapon you can use to fight your enemy. But if you don't know how to wield it and use it, it can become your worst enemy in itself. But who's the enemy we're fighting here? What's the weapon even for? The enemies are entropy and confirmation bias. So the enemy here isn't your partner. Instead, we're fighting entropy and confirmation bias. Entropy and confirmation bias creates many layers of negative feedback loops and chain reactions in itself. First, we are fighting the entropy and confirmation bias we have against ourselves to properly learn the program. A lot of you have, you come into this program having your own unique learning styles, which may not fit this program. That's entropy. That's confirmation bias screwing you up before you even begin the program. But like we said, don't expect the program to mold to you. You mold yourself to the program. Fight the entropy, fight the confirmation bias. Then we're fighting the entropy and confirmation bias to master the internal shifts. And again, whenever we have holes in our bulletproof vest, what we're talking about is that you have bad paradigms that lead to all these negative loops. We're trying to reverse those loops right now. We're trying to reverse the loops of how you talk, how you've been designed and programmed and conditioned to talk your whole life. Then we're fighting the entropy and confirmation bias that our partner has against us, using the bulletproof vest and using the frameworks. Then we're fighting the entropy and confirmation bias your life and relationships will naturally bring. So even if you create safety, life just gives you issues. That's entropy. That's life giving you its own confirmation bias on you. And we'll talk more about what that means later on, but we're fighting essentially multiple layers of entropy and confirmation bias here. But if you continuously win the battles between the many layers of entropy and confirmation bias, you will eventually win the war. And the weapon you have is how you can control those feedback loops and chain reactions. So on the one hand here, we're creating intense exponentiality in a positive direction by mastering the right layers of processes and consistently playing them out properly, internally and externally. But then on the other hand, the different layers of entropy, internal and external, and your personal and partner's strong confirmation bias, the negative confirmation bias about who you were, is counteracting that. And who wins the war depends on which of this force is more powerful. Now, if you don't know how to create exponentiality in positive direction, notice here you can actually have two forces pulling you down, which probably is what's been happening. So here's kind of a more realistic view of your journey right now. This is a start where people will have this elevated sense of optimism about this whole journey. But then once you join the program, you will have this initial period of internal work. This is when you're growing your untetheredness, your bulletproof vest, your frameworks, etc. And you will begin to see how much resistance you have regarding not only changing yourself, but also how much work and effort and complexity this will take. But then your partner will also start to feel your changes, and the paradox of change and the test will really come into play. You will get intense resistance. And if you have the bulletproof vest built properly, while this is not easy, this should be seen as a positive and a massive opportunity. And this phase right here can be a long time. It can be like 2 to 6 plus months. Now, then you enter this longer period. And this is a period of entropy and confirmation bias. And it will show up in the form of a paradox of change. These are when you will face intense up and down swings in your outcome. And you will sometimes feel like things actually got worse with your partner, that your partner is even more resistant, that you are more confused even, and that things may not be getting better anytime soon. This is the point where most people will want to give up, where your bulletproof vest will most likely get destroyed if not built properly. But if you have the bulletproof vest built properly, this should be easy. I mean, just take a look at the Facebook group and everyone who went through this phase. It's easy. It can be seen as a positive and as a massive opportunity. This can be a long time. It can be 6 to 12 months depending on how much negative confirmation bias and negative entropy you have allowed to set into your relationship, your life, etc. And then you will face this stage where the resistance and the confirmation bias will feel the strongest around this time, around the end. This is really where you'll feel like you're going backwards and not really making any progress. You're making negative progress, you'll feel like. This is where the illusions to give up on the relationship and the illusions to move on will feel the strongest. Because here's the moment when your partner can see that you're changing, but she doesn't really feel it yet. Because she may feel like, okay, the actions are kind of incongruent. He's not perfect yet. I still don't trust him yet. I can't trust him yet. But this is also where your conviction in the principles and the processes will really begin to matter. And I want to take you back to the iceberg example again, to where, like, imagine you're trying to melt this massive iceberg, right? And you're using a hairdryer here to heat up the room slowly. Even though you're not seeing the iceberg melt, you're not seeing the external manifestations of the iceberg melting, you're still going to have faith in that and heating up the room with the hairdryer, because you know that eventually it will cross that hockey stick effect and it will melt. And that's how it feels. If you have this conviction in the principles, that's how it feels. Where you may not be seeing the external manifestations of things you're doing, but it's okay, you'll keep going anyway. Because you believe you have this conviction in the principles, in the process. So if you have your bulletproof vest built properly, and you have your internal conviction, this should be easy to pass through as well. And then the hockey stick effect comes in, and a tipping point comes in. After a long period of hardship and tests, because you were so consistent and relentless with your changes, because you truly showed your partner that your new self is here to stay forever, it's a lifestyle, she begins to feel your changes in a deep way. And you will see a sudden shift in her behaviors. But what's funny is that throughout this whole dip, your process doesn't really change. You're doing the same things. The only thing that changes now is that the positive effect of the feedback loop has taken over. This is when you've built such a strong momentum of feedback loops and chain reactions that it counteracts and just destroys the momentum, just overtakes the momentum of the negative side, the enemy. So here you've been starving the enemy. You've been starving the entropy and confirmation bias. You've been starving it, and so there's not really much of a feedback loop going downhill. But you're giving the positive shifts a lot of fuel. And if you average the two out, boom. Now, the last part here is really the true test of sustainability. So when you finally get your results, you will feel the strong urge to slow down in your processes that got you the results in the first place. Most people will slow down and go back to their old ways here, basically getting them back to square one. But the true winners have learned to enjoy the process intrinsically and will double down no matter what to continue the upward trend. And this is your choice. And this will depend on how closely you follow the principles to get your results. If you get your results without being untethered first, you're going to crumble. But if you become untethered first and you kind of follow the steps of this program, you're going to find that keeping this upward trend will be very easy. Now, finally, let's look at the differences here between the successful versus the failures. Let's look at what the failure minds look like. It looks like this. It has some positive feedback loops, but also some negative feedback loops as well. Because these people, usually, they either do not have or did not develop the awareness of the different types, different layers of feedback loops in their life. For example, if you're impatient about learning this program, in the last phase and in this module so far, we're basically teaching you about the different feedback loops that exist in your life. If you're impatient and you're saying, like, I don't want to know that, I just want to know what to do, what to say, you are here. You're not trying to develop your awareness of the different layers of feedback loops that exist in your life. And if you don't even know the layers that you have, there's no way you can reverse it. You can't fix or reverse something you don't understand, you're not even aware of. And so these people, they kind of pick and choose the various parts of the program they want to follow and the ones they want to ignore. They do some things right, but they do a lot of things wrong. And the worst part is that they don't know what they're doing wrong because they're not aware. So to make matters worse, also, they have not learned enough to actually catch themselves when they are doing something wrong. This is the worst part about, people who are having the wrong mindset on things, is that they're doing something wrong, but they don't have the right knowledge to critique themselves, the fact that they're doing wrong. And I want you to watch this video here. I'm going to post this video right now. It's from TED Ed. And it's kind of showing you why usually it's the most incompetent people who think they're so awesome, because they don't have the right mechanism to actually critique themselves.
Are you as good at things as you think you are? How good are you at managing money? What about reading people's emotions? How healthy are you compared to other people you know? Are you better than average at grammar? Knowing how competent we are and how our skills stack up against other people's is more than a self-esteem boost. It helps us figure out when we can forge ahead on our own decisions and instincts and when we need instead to seek out advice. But psychological research suggests that we're not very good at evaluating ourselves accurately. In fact, we frequently overestimate our own abilities. Researchers have a name for this phenomenon: the Dunning-Kruger effect. This effect explains why more than 100 studies have shown that people display illusory superiority. We judge ourselves as better than others to a degree that violates the laws of math. When software engineers at 2 companies were asked to rate their performance, 32% of the engineers at one company and 42% at the other put themselves in the top 5%. In another study, 88% of American drivers described themselves as having above-average driving skills. These aren't isolated findings. On average, people tend to rate themselves better than most in disciplines ranging from health, leadership skills, ethics, and beyond. What's particularly interesting is that those with the least ability are often the most likely to overrate their skills to the greatest extent. People measurably poor at logical reasoning, grammar, financial knowledge, math, emotional intelligence, running medical lab tests, and chess all tend to rate their expertise almost as favorably as actual experts do. So who's most vulnerable to this delusion? Sadly, all of us, because we all have pockets of incompetence we don't recognize. But why? When psychologists Dunning and Kruger first described the effect in 1999, they argued that people lacking knowledge and skill in particular areas suffer a double curse. First, they make mistakes and reach poor decisions. But second, those same knowledge gaps also prevent them from catching their errors. In other words, poor performers lack the very expertise needed to recognize how badly they're doing. For example, when the researchers studied participants in a college debate tournament, the bottom 25% of teams in preliminary rounds lost nearly 4 out of every 5 matches. But they thought they were winning almost 60%. Without a strong grasp of the rules of debate, the students simply couldn't recognize when or how often their arguments broke down. The Dunning-Kruger effect isn't a question of ego blinding us to our weaknesses. People usually do admit their deficits once they can spot them. In one study, students who had initially done badly on a logic quiz and then took a mini course on logic were quite willing to label their original performances as awful.
So here, their bulletproof vest has basically a bunch of holes. So they convince and justify to themselves why often when things get hard, why giving up, getting pissy is appropriate. And you will see this in the Facebook group sometimes of someone having the wrong mindset, having all these wrong feedback loops, them not being aware about it, and giving like a hissy fit in the Facebook group and going like, oh, this sucks. Never realizing that this is just them not learning the program properly. And they convince themselves of why, like, oh, my partner is so silly, so stupid, whatever it is. This is not worth it. But they don't realize, like, they're just justifying it to themselves. They're playing victim, and they're convincing themselves through their victim mindset that their victimization has actually merit. Well, actually, it doesn't have merit at all. So sure, they have some positive feedback loops, but also they have a lot of negative ones that are counteracting the positive loops. And the worst part is that they're unaware of the many feedback loops that are negative right now. And so exponentiality never occurs, and they stay stagnant, or their situation continues to decline here. And the worst part, because they're unaware of their own shortcomings, they naturally blame other people. They blame the program, they blame me, they blame their partner, situations, etc. It's insane. It's crazy. But if you look at the minds who are successful, they have developed this very intense awareness of the different feedback loops, the different layers of feedback loops in their life. And they develop this awareness because they are patiently learning the new awareness of them. Right? These are the guys that are patiently learning each step of the program, knowing that it's not just about the obvious stuff, it's also about the subtle stuff too. They pay close attention to every single part of the program and tries to turn every single feedback loop into a positive, as best they can. They have developed such heightened sense of awareness that they quickly understand the remaining negative feedback loops they have. And so here, because they do the work, the many layers of the bulletproof vest is very solid. And they have very few holes, and whatever holes they have quickly gets patched. They are consistent, and they're consistent in a very effortless way. And they're also very relentless, because part of the bulletproof vest is teaching you how to become relentless through the difficult moments, through the paradox of change. And most of the feedback loops and chain reactions in their life are positive, and they greatly outweigh the negative, like this. And so exponentiality eventually occurs as they begin to get massive success, and they get it fast. And it's because of how relentless they are. And the funny part is that, these people, they're the ones who never ever blame other people. They only look at themselves. They never victimize. But to me, the reason why they were able to get this exponential growth was because they never blame others in the first place. It's not like they got the results, that's why they don't have no one to blame. But they don't blame anyone, that's why they get the results. This is why we must begin by mastering bucket 4, the learning principle, so that we can learn the many different internal and external feedback loops we need to know. Because you don't know what you don't know, and you can't fix what you don't know, which is a shame. Then with our optimal learning skills, we must master the other 3 buckets and ensure that we do not miss anything and master everything there. Nothing more, nothing less. So I want you to keep your blinders on and master your daily practice processes and master the principles that we teach in this program. And as we master all 4 buckets, it will not only make continuing the program and the process easier to not give up basically, but it will also make it easier to execute the bulletproof vest and the frameworks. So add all this stuff, all these new paradigms you have about life, about entropy, confirmation bias, and so on, to bucket 2 of your mental map. And whenever you are finding yourself struggling with this journey, struggling with doubt, struggling, second-guessing yourself, remind yourself of these paradigms. I swear to you, it will shift a lot of things. It will shift how you feel very, very quickly. It will give you a lot of motivation, a lot of hope very, very quickly. Now, finally, let's talk about winning the internal war. And this is going to be the major paradigm shifts I want you to leave with from this module that I want you to take with you. And these paradigm shifts are really the implications of what it means to embrace this whole war between feedback loops and chain reactions and entropy and confirmation bias. So I want to revisit this notion of the bulletproof vest a bit. And I want to show you here, from what we learned in this module, a deeper look into the anatomy of your bulletproof vest. So your bulletproof vest is not just one layer of your willpower, but it consists of many different layers. For example, we will learn many of these layers as we progress through this module phase in this program. Basically, this is whatever is in bucket 2, which we already should have a lot of layers of it in our mental map today. We should have these layers at least. We should have avoiding the victim mindset, embracing a winning mindset and culture, the farmers and climate mindset, and so on. These are layers of your bulletproof vest, and each of these 5 layers helps you become more bulletproof through different situations. Basically, they allow you to have a different paradigm of how you see life. So if you find yourself panicking and you are scared, you are trying to rush things, well, change your paradigm. Have the farmer's mindset, the climate mindset, effort and surrender. And you'll find that once you change your paradigm, you will change your emotions. These are layers that allow you to become bulletproof. But to become bulletproof is not just one layer, it's many of these layers. And each of these layers creates a feedback loop within itself. So, for example, as you grow your anti-victim mind, it'll be easier in the future to spot the victim mindset. You become less victimized, you become more powerful, more knowledgeable, more aware. As you become more aware, you become more anti-victim, etc., etc. There's a loop within each of these layers as well. But each of these layers also creates a chain reaction to the other layers. So think about here the chain reaction between the different layers above. For example, as you embrace a winning mindset and culture, it will make it easier for you to avoid the victim mindset. As you avoid the victim mindset, it will make it easier for you to avoid the disguises of desire. As you avoid the disguises of desire, it will make it easier for you to pay attention to the farmers and climate mindset. And when you do that, you can have better effort and surrender to the process. There's a chain reaction between all these layers. And these layers also create feedback loop between each other. Now, think about again how mastering one layer makes it easier to master other layers. These are all interconnected, guys, right? So again, the takeaway here is that your bulletproof vest has many layers, and these many layers not only create a feedback loop within itself, but also they are interconnected, all of them. They influence each other. So how you do one thing affects everything else. Again, picture that web. So it's crucial that you master all of these layers of the bulletproof vest and not have any weaknesses. Because think about what would happen if you had holes in your literal bulletproof vest. Like if you were wearing a bulletproof vest with holes and weak spots, it would be suicide. It would be deadly. And if you don't master all the layers of your bulletproof vest, it's like going to war with massive holes in your armor. It's freaking suicide, right? So it's crucial that your bulletproof vest is able to withstand the toughest, the biggest, the highest caliber bullets, the toughest resistance, the toughest conflicts, the toughest tough truths, etc. If your bulletproof vest can only withstand the light and easy stuff, it will only be as useful as an umbrella on a sunny day. Again, we don't want that surviving mindset. We don't want a bulletproof vest that will crumble under enough pressure. We want the thriving mindset. We want a bulletproof vest that the bigger the bullet, the stronger it gets somehow. It just repels it. That's what we want. So it's crucial that your bulletproof vest becomes a deeply programmed part of you and not something you wear on and off. So I hear some people saying sometimes oh, I had a conversation and I put on my bulletproof vest. Well, if you put it on, if you have to put it on, I don't think you understand what the bulletproof vest is. So wearing it on and off is like going to war and then only putting on your bulletproof vest when you're about to get shot. Oh, hold on, don't shoot me yet. Let me put on my bulletproof vest. Come on, man. That's a great way to die. This must become part of your skin almost, the bulletproof vest. Now let's talk about the importance of the subtle as well. Again, the internal state is impossible to fake. As we mentioned in phase 1, repeatedly, your partner wants to feel that your changes are real and permanent. To do that, we must have a solid bulletproof vest. It's crucial to define the subtle things you do, the unplanned things you say and do, what you do during the hard moments, and it's crucial for being consistent. If you don't master the bulletproof vest, you have zero chance of playing out the frameworks, because whatever you know goes out the window. You have the bad macros that you will never going to be aware of, and you go blank. So again, we don't want to be the surviving mindset here. We don't want to use the willpower to try to use our mental acrobatics, our willpower to change the emotions. We want to have a thriving mindset when we change the reflexive paradigms. We want to rise as the pressure builds. So again, if you find yourself at a loss for words or stumped when you learn the frameworks later, 99% of the time, it's not an issue with frameworks. Usually it's because you have some missing layers of your bulletproof vest. If your microtones and microexpressions are off, it's not a framework issue, it's a bulletproof vest issue. If you find that your default, the default you get to when you're tired, when things are hard, is still negative, it's a bulletproof vest issue. If you're having lots of slip-ups, bulletproof vest issue, internal issue. If your partner is struggling to fully trust you, even though you're saying the right things, internal issue. I want you to print this out, okay? And always remind yourself here that internal is more important than external stuff. Much more important. So you already have some layers of the bulletproof vest in your bucket 2 right now. Let's give you more based on the learnings of this module. Let's start here with the paradigm shifts I want you to have that you can use to fight this whole battle between entropy and confirmation bias. Number 1, I want you to start seeing conflicts, resistance, and misunderstandings as are actually a gold mine of opportunities. So again, if you want to look at this, your own confirmation bias, right? If you want to look at issues as issues, you'll find many reasons why they're issues. If you want to spot the opportunities, you'll also find many reasons why they're opportunities. Many, many reasons. So let's go deeper into this. If the conflicts, misunderstandings, and resistance is caused by something you did, then you should see this as the fact that they are massive opportunities for you to learn holes in your process, your thinking, your execution, etc. The lessons you learn from these will pay dividends for the rest of your life. Be glad that you're able to learn it now rather than later, because it gives you more time to enjoy the fruits of your learnings. What do I mean here? So most people see mistakes and problems as a bad thing. It's like, oh my God, I made a mistake. This is bad. It's something that they should avoid. They should suppress, they should hide. Or if it's found out, just get around it as fast as possible. Okay, fine, I made a mistake. So what? And so this is also why most people rush the process of solving the problem. Or they subconsciously suppress the problems and tell themselves that there's no issue here. And most of you are probably taking this approach a lot when you are trying to save your relationship, and why you're probably here is that you've been trying to either suppress the problems, pretend they don't exist, etc. And it's probably also why a lot of you are probably trying to rush the process of learning the program and miss a bunch. Because you're trying to basically, you hate this time, like you're dreading this time that you have of confronting your mistakes, confronting your shortcomings. And you want to get out of it as soon as possible. You're not seeing this as an opportunity. You're seeing this as, okay, I need to get over this. I need to get out of this soon, right? I need to get out of the tunnel soon. And why most of you wait until the problem is dire, because you don't want to confront those problems. You don't want to confront what you're missing here. But I want you to see problems as a simple indicator that there are lessons you need to learn. And you are free to ignore these calls for you to learn the lessons, but you can't ignore the consequences. And the consequence here is that the same problems will keep coming up until you finally recognize, respond, and learn from these mistakes. And sometimes we need a slap in the face. So whenever we get these slaps in the face, I personally love it when I get a slap in the face, especially when I get it today, early on in my life, because they force me to finally learn what I eventually need to learn anyway. So whenever I get a slap in the face, it's telling me, life is basically telling me, dude, you gotta freaking wake up right now. You gotta learn from this mistake right now. And often, usually, I've probably gotten a lot of slaps in the face before, but never hard enough to where I actually learn from it. But when I don't learn from it, I keep making the same mistakes that eventually lead to harder and harder slaps in the face, until eventually the slap becomes so hard that I have to learn from it. And once I learn from it, I will stop making the same mistakes, and I will stop facing that same problem over and over again. So I see these slaps in the face, and when you are in this program, you've had some slaps in the face. I see these as massive opportunities to live a better life. I'd rather get 100 slaps in the face today than 100 slaps in the face later in life. So if we understand this philosophy a bit deeper, if we understand that you'll keep making the same mistakes and getting the same bad outcomes until you learn the lesson, you must realize that the slap in the face will come eventually. Like, you are due for multiple slaps in the face in your life. So let's say that you're going to get 100 slaps in the face in your whole life. I would rather get it when I'm 20 than when I'm 80. Because when I get it when I'm 80, I only have like maybe 10 years to really live the benefits of it. If I get it when I'm 20, I have my whole life to enjoy it. So whenever you get a slap in the face, think, nice. This tells me a lesson I need to learn. I'm going to learn it so that I can benefit from it for the rest of my life. So a lot of people, they avoid slaps in the face. Whenever they get a slap in the face, they go like, oh, let me just forget about that. Right? I don't want to confront that. They don't learn anything. And so they keep making the same mistakes until they get another slap in the face, which then they try to hide again. Just a terrible feedback loop. But if you take a slap in the face and you say, okay, great, thanks for the slap in the face, let me learn from it. Positive feedback loop all the way. And think about the positive and negative feedback loop that creates as well. So let's say here, we start off with a paradigm, we get scared of any conflicts arising. But the conflicts inevitably arise. They come up eventually because of entropy, because of the guarantee of entropy. And so whenever conflicts come up, we naturally lose our calm, our bulletproof vest, and we do things that we regret. And because we're so scared of confronting these problems, we don't learn from it. And so we rush to the problem and we don't learn properly from it, and we'll continue to make the same and more mistakes in the future. So for example, right now you're dreading confronting the fact that you fucked up. You broke down your relationship, and you probably have a strong desire here to skip and rush through the program. It's like going through a haunted house. You're just like, oh my God, I gotta scram. I gotta get out of here quickly. You're missing so many things. And so as you create more problems, the more conflicts arise, the more we start to see it as inconvenient. And also, there's another feedback loop that's created here in that as we lose our calm a lot, we lose our BPV a lot, the tension and the performance anxiety rises as we dread having to face bad emotions. And I'm sure a lot of us feel this. Whenever things come up, we say like, oh no, what now? Another conflict. Oh my God. And so if you don't learn something, we don't grow our knowledge and our ability to resolve the same or worse issues. And this conflict, this cycle just keeps creating really negative feedback loops, all starting with the wrong paradigm of we get scared of conflicts arising. We get scared of confronting our issues. And if this happens long enough, this is how people begin to develop many different weird tendencies, many different like defense mechanisms, and why people get easily offended. Like there's some people in this program, very few, like 1 in 500. But whenever you give them feedback, they get all like defensive. It's like, oh my God, what if it wasn't that bad? How can you say that to me? Whatever it is. It's like, well, that shows how scared you are of even confronting your own problems. And you can't learn. You will do regretful things. You will not have the bulletproof vest. You will not do the frameworks. And you will continue to create problems and conflicts if that's your paradigm. Or sometimes the other thing people do too is that they just tell themselves how awesome they are. Like there's a few people, again, very few and far in between, but they just keep commenting and telling people like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this program. You know what? She'll be so lucky to have the new me. But actually, they don't actually do any of the work. They just tell themselves they're awesome, but they don't actually do the work to make themselves awesome. They're a bit delusional here because again, they don't like confronting that they may not be awesome. And so they skip the part. They skip the part of confronting the fact that they're not awesome, learning, and then becoming awesome. So they skip the two parts, the first two parts, and they just say like, I'm awesome. But if we embrace conflicts arising, and the conflicts do come up, we can stay poised to learn and respond. And we either here are better poised to fix the issue, or we patiently learn new skills or knowledge. So here, if we have the actual patience to use the principles we learn to deal with the issues and use the process of success to learn. For example, if you don't see the current state as a state you need to get out of soon, you're just okay, just growing one step at a time, right? Following in the process. Admitting the fact that, yeah, you fucked up. Yeah, things are going to be bad for quite a while, but it's okay. I'm going to keep learning one step at a time. And so here, when we have this mindset, when the conflicts do come up, we see those as more opportunities to learn and showcase our newfound acceptance and calm. And I'll show you this a bit later. And we also, the tension and the performance anxiety decreases as we find that we are able to cope. It's fine. It's just problems. And we grow in knowledge and ability to resolve the same and worse issues. And this, when you have the process where you can learn, problems no longer become issues. We no longer have these weird tendencies and defense mechanism, and we don't get offended so easily when others point out our issues or when we make mistakes. We don't just tell ourselves that we are awesome because we subconsciously dread facing our shortcomings, but we face them head on and we fix them. And most of the people in the program are like this. They just have a very healthy view of learning, that whenever they screw up, they don't defend themselves, they don't get all weird. They just say like, okay, I made a mistake. What can I learn from it? Process of success, let's go. Now, that's how you should see conflicts arising that you made, right? Whenever you make a mistake, understand that whenever you get slapped in the face, it's a good thing. Have a different paradigm in which you see and interpret your own mistakes. And I swear, if you start to interpret your paradigm like this, where we embrace the conflicts that we have, the mistakes that we have much better, you're going to learn much faster. You're going to find that creating safety is much easier. Because imagine creating safety with someone who doesn't even want to admit their own mistakes, who is too afraid to admit their own mistakes. It's really hard. But what if we're talking about conflicts, resistance, and misunderstandings from your partner, from life, something external? These are really a massive opportunity for you to create safety and trust. And these are opportunities that would not otherwise exist if there were not conflicts, resistance, misunderstandings in the first place. What do I mean? So most people, they see conflicts and problems arising as a bad thing, as a sign that they're doing a bad job, as an inconvenience. Now, if you're scared and frustrated and angry when conflicts, tough truths, and problems, resistance arise, you're really missing the point of life. So firstly, right, entropy and confirmation bias is just a normal part of living life. Trying to avoid entropy and confirmation bias or misunderstandings is like living every single day trying to avoid rain. It doesn't make sense. So most people live their life as if their whole world is about to fall apart. They're like sitting here and they're so scared of the next conflict. They're like, oh my God, please, nothing else. And then the conflict comes and it's like, oh my God, fall apart. So So simply changing your expectation on this can do wonders. Just simply expecting, like when you wake up in the morning, for example, don't think like, oh, today's going to be a perfect day, no, nothing will go wrong. Just imagine like, yeah, things will go wrong and that's totally fine. Just smile through it. It's part of life. Just simply changing that can do quite a lot of wonders. Second, the bigger point though, is that conflicts, tough truths, problems, resistance are all massive opportunities to create a ton of safety, to create a ton of trust, and start a positive loop. For example, let's take a look at the negative loops and chain reactions from people who tend to avoid problems or see them as an inconvenience. So we get scared of any conflicts arising. The conflicts inevitably come up. We naturally lose our bulletproof vest and calm. We get impatient. We get like, this bothers me. Why do you have to bring it up? We're having a nice dinner right now. And we destroy safety for our partner in the relationship. And I'll show you more ways of how we can destroy safety. I mean, we don't destroy safety just by being angry, right? We sometimes destroy safety, let's say, when we try to fix the problems too quickly. When we don't really listen, we just say like, here's the solution. Can we move on now? Right? There's a lot of ways we can destroy safety, but I want you to see for now that when we have the wrong paradigm, leads to wrong emotions, leads to wrong actions. So as we destroy safety and trust in the relationship, more issues will get bottled up, the emotional flywheel takes place, and they worsen very quickly. And so as we destroy safety, the conflicts inevitably, more conflicts come up because of entropy. And the more conflicts arise, the more we start to see it as an inconvenient thing. This is one whole feedback loop. But also, as we go through this, we also start to get performance anxiety. Oh man, I don't know if I can take this right now. What now? And we get more scared of conflicts arising. And as we destroy safety for our partner, the tension builds, which makes it more of a chore to deal with conflicts in the future, which makes us even more scared of conflicts arising. And the more scared we are, it just starts this very terrible cycle. And if this happens long enough, that will lead to the eventual and sudden end to the relationship. And probably what happened to a lot of you as well. And again, these conflicts that we talk about can be from external self, like life. It can be from your partner bringing up something to you that may be hard to hear, or the self. Now let's look at though the positive loops that you create when you learn to embrace entropy and confirmation bias and happily deal with them. So here you learn to naturally embrace conflicts, and the conflicts do come up, but then your layer of the BPV is still intact. So you thrive and you smile through these conflicts. And as you do that, you can play out the frameworks better. You can create safety and trust for your partner and turn negative into opportunities. And as safety and trust is created, it makes it easier for your partner to address the issues next time. And when this happens, and it makes it easier for your partner to avoid issues too, because as you have safety and trust, your partner will just start to assume better things about you, which reduces the number of conflicts that come up. So the conflicts no longer become a nuisance, but massive opportunities, which makes it easier for you to learn to embrace conflicts even more. And the past success makes you feel like a king. Yeah, bring it on whenever problems come up. And it lessens the tension and trains each other to like expressing and dealing with conflicts. So let me give you a very simple example of this. Okay, I know this is a bit complex because I want you to embrace the complexity here, because relationships are complex. There's feedback loops, there's chain reactions. I want you to be aware of it. Level up. I want you to level up with me. So I'll give you a very easy example of this. 2 weeks ago, I was at dinner with my partner. And during dinner, it was supposed to be a nice dinner, she brought up something. She brought up the fact that, hey, I found some of your messages that you sent to your ex. Not recently, but like back then, like way back then. And she felt very sad, right? And so if I was playing out this negative loop where I get scared of those conflicts arising, and she brings that up, I'm going to be very inconvenienced. I'm going to think to myself, man, what an inconvenience. It's supposed to be a nice dinner. You're bringing it up now? Why are you telling me this right now? Right? We might get defensive and we start to go like, oh, deny stuff that we actually did. I mean, a lot of things could happen here. And if I'm scared like that, I'm going to start to either do two things. Either I'm going to start the passive phase of like, I don't want to talk about this right now. Or I'm going to say, well, here's my explanation to you. Here's why I was doing that. Right? Here's my justification. Without actually understanding what your partner is saying. Or we could start to lecture our partner. Well, it's not healthy to bring up conversations like that. Now, we're on a date, honey. Can we save this for later? Right there. Right? And I'm sure many of you have seen yourself respond in the same ways. And right there, we are starting all these negative loops. Right? But instead what I did was, I said to her, oh, interesting. And you will learn this more in the future parts of the program when you learn the frameworks. But instead I said, okay, let me explore that. Thanks for telling me that. Thanks for expressing that to me. That must have been quite difficult for you to see and hear. And yeah, I guess tell me how you're feeling now. And so we started to have this session where we're investigating what she feels deeply. And I made her feel deeply understood, deeply acknowledged in that conversation. And so here, it started with my paradigm that, hey, conflicts will come up. And so when conflict come up, I'm not panicked. I'm just going like, oh yeah, you found that those messages. I guess tell me more about that. And we started to create safety and trust. And what's funny is that when I started to listen to her, I can see her anger kind of dissipating a lot. And things just calming down a lot. And afterwards, after dinner, she told me, hey, thanks for listening to me. I appreciated the fact that you weren't trying to justify yourself, explain yourself. I think we both know that you made a mistake. And I respect the fact that you just listened and you just accepted it. And she told me, you know, this is the kind of moments that make me feel very safe to actually express stuff to you. Because nothing bad happens when I do. All you do is just listen and I feel understood. We feel like we get on the same page. And so here, my priority was not to solve the problem. It was to create safety and trust. And I can create safety and trust because I was calm. And I was calm because of this different paradigm. So as safety and trust is created, it makes it easier for my partner later to address more issues. And next time, she's also going to bring it up calmly because she assumes that I don't need to act up because he's going to listen anyway. On my side, these conflicts are no longer a nuisance. I don't crumble. I don't panic whenever I get issues because moments like these tell me issues don't need to be issues. Instead, they're massive opportunities to show her how much safety she has. And when I think back to my success, it makes me feel like a king a bit. Yeah, next time you want to tell me something, bring it on. I can take it. And it lessens the tension that we have towards each other. And it trains myself that I can express to my partner. And when I express, good things happen. And when my partner expresses something to me, good things happen as well. It trains each other to express even more. And all this stuff increases my ability to embrace conflicts in the future, starting this very positive loop. So I hope that example makes sense to you. And again, as you progress in this program, as you learn more of the frameworks, I think this will become very, very clear to you how we do this. But for now, the takeaway I want you to have is simply learn to naturally embrace conflicts. See conflicts, see issues that either started from you or started from external stuff like your partner in a different way. Expect different things out of life. Don't expect a life that has no issues, but expect a life that has issues, and the whole point of life is to turn them from negative into positive. And if this happens long enough, you're going to create so many layers of positive feedback loops and chain reactions. And it all starts with how you interpret conflicts, how you interpret resistance and misunderstandings. So again, just to hit this point home, the best memories and moments for my partner and I was not just the good moments or the worst moments, but when the worst turns into best. That's the most memorable moments. And I think if you look at your relationship, you kind of feel the same. The moments you remember most were the moments when you as a couple, you turned something that was sour, that was bad, into something good, and you got through it together. So, for example, what happens, right, if my partner did not express the conflicts, the misunderstandings, and the resistance to me for whatever reason, whether she doesn't have safety, trust? Sure, you'll get the illusion here that everything is doing fine, everything is great, and that nothing is wrong. And it does probably feel pretty good. But if history has taught you one thing, it should be the fact that you not knowing about something does not mean that thing doesn't exist, right? So before your partner told you that she wanted a divorce, she's been probably wanting divorce for a long time. When she told you that she wanted a divorce, the only thing that changed was now that you know about it. But the very fact that she wanted a divorce never really changed. So the worst thing that can happen to me is that I destroy safety and trust and essentially force my partner to hide their problems for me. Because this will only leave me in a completely powerless position to do something about it, because I can't fix something I'm not even aware of. But if I have the right internal and external process, the frameworks later on, I want to find out the issues, because now that I know about it, it empowers me to take control and turn that negative into positive. Now, I want you to pause here and think deeply about how this applies to every single aspect of your life. Right? Think about sales, for example. I would rather the prospect I'm talking to tell me what their objections are, rather than them telling me, like, it's fine, I'll think about it. It's like, if they say I'll think about it, I don't know what to say to that. But if they tell me the reasons why they don't like me or the program, whatever it is, I can say something about that. I want that. I want the tough truth. I want resistance. I want the misunderstandings to come out. Because if they don't come out, they're still there. But I will be powerless to do something about it. But if they do come out, I can do something about it if I have the right process. So resistance, conflicts, misunderstandings are massive, massive opportunities. And these opportunities would not exist if they were never expressed. You want those expressions. And so when you get misunderstandings, when you get resistance, so think about the conflicts, the tough truths, the problems, resistance. Do you see how those are actually massive opportunities for you to create safety and trust? Massive. Which brings me to the second point, which is, I want you to embrace conflict and misunderstandings. You want misunderstandings. You want resistance. You want conflicts. If you have the right approach, they become massive opportunities. Say fuck yeah. Now, I'm not saying you should just manufacture problems. I'm just saying whenever there are problems that exist already, you want them to come out as fast as you can, as fast as possible. And whenever they do come out, I want you to think about Tyler's post here. Pause, zoom out, take a moment to feel deeply grateful for your life situation exactly as it is. You needed the relational pain and challenge. It was the only way for you to wake up and evolve. Will you be consumed by self-pity, or will you use this as a gift, a springboard for your evolution to your new self? And thanks. So if you ever find yourself thinking about how much you fucked up in the past, in your life, in your relationship, and you're beating yourself up for it, if you're discovering some tough truth about the relationship, about your situation, about your partner, about what you did in the past, if you're going through some very tough resistance from your partner, from life, or even internally, or if your partner is really feeling angry and indifferent towards you because of a deeply seated misunderstanding, take a moment to say, fuck yeah, game on. Seriously, fuck yeah, game on. These issues, tough truths, misunderstandings, and conflicts already exist, regardless of whether you were aware of it or not. But finally being aware of it might feel bad to the average person, but you're not just some average person. You're in this program and equipped with the right process to turn this into fucking gold. Not yet, you're still early on in the program, but when you learn the frameworks, when you learn all the layers of the bulletproof vest, you can turn this into freaking gold. Game on. So conflicts, misunderstandings, and resistances only become problems when you don't have the right internal and external process to turn it from negative into positive. Well, the good thing is that you're about to learn everything you need to know how to do this. Number 3 is relax. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Here's something you need to understand. Results today was determined 6 to 24 months ago. What you do today will determine what happens 6 to 24 months later. Just focus on your own shit and take it day by day. Here's what I mean. I have this picture of Jeff Bezos. He's kind of doing this pose where it's like, dude, relax, man. Chill the fuck out a little bit. In my experience, there are 3 major sources of anxiety for most people as they're going through this journey. Number 1, they're anxious because they're trying to overanalyze what went wrong. They're trying to look at like, okay, how did it get so bad? And they're trying to think about all these things that went wrong. And they're trying to overanalyze the quick fix. Well, what do I need to do now? I need to do something now. I need to make something happen now. And whenever they try that thing, they realize it doesn't work. They're like, oh my God, how come it doesn't work? How come she still blocked me? Whatever it is. Relax, young grasshopper. What is happening to you today was a result of feedback loops from 6 to 24 months ago. So it's not like you said something yesterday and then your partner blocked you. No. Your partner blocked you because of all the things you did to destroy trust and safety for the last 6 to 24 months. Okay, all the tiny things you did. So it's not just the one thing you did. Stop trying to overanalyze what you did wrong. There's not a quick fix or short-term fixes. And don't panic when you don't see results right now. Stop running around with your heads on fire trying to fix your relationship quickly in the short term. Like, oh my God, what do I do right now? Just relax, bro. Be a calm CEO of your life and relationship, just like Jeff Bezos here. Have that quiet confidence about you. Relax. Observe. Look at what's happening. Look at the system. Use your first principles thinking to analyze. What is happening here? Why am I here? It's because of a series of feedback loops and chain reactions. What do I need to do now? Strategize. Use your first principles thinking, systems thinking to strategize. Be surgical and be patient. Focus on the 1 to 2 things you need to focus on to grow your intrinsic value and grow yourself patiently. So I want you to watch Jeff Bezos' video here and how he talks about how he makes decisions in life, how he sees decisions, how long-term he views decisions, and just look at the calm he has when he's making those decisions. I want you to have the same calm, the same sense of calm. He's very surgical with his approach. When his stock price goes down, he doesn't go, oh my God, my stock price goes down, what do I do? He just goes like, hey, if the stock price goes down, is what I did 24 months ago. So what can we focus on now to influence the stock price 24 months later? Let's be smart about this. What is the 1 or 2 things we can do to do this? So let me show you this video and you'll see exactly what I mean.
And so then on sleep, I get 8 hours of sleep. I prioritize it. Unless I'm traveling in different time zones, sometimes it's impossible, but I am very focused on it. And for me, I need 8 hours of sleep. I think better. I have more energy. My mood is better. All these things. And think about it. As a senior executive, what do you really get paid to do? As a senior executive, you get paid to make a small number of high-quality decisions. Your job is not to make thousands of decisions every day. So let's say that I slept 6 hours a day. Or let's go really crazy and say I slept 4 hours a day. So now I just got 4 so-called productive hours back. So if I was going to, have, say, 12 hours of productive time during any waking day, now all of a sudden I have 12 plus 4, I have 16 productive hours. So I have 33% more time to make decisions. So if I was going to make, 100 decisions, now I can make 133 decisions. And by the way, if I did that arithmetic wrong, I'm sorry. And so you make 133 decisions. Is that really worth it if the quality of those decisions might be lower because you're tired or grouchy or any number of things? Now, it's different if it's a startup company. I mean, you're really, when Amazon was 100 people, it's a different story. But Amazon's not a startup company. And all of our senior executives operate the same way I do. They work in the future. They live in the future. None of the people who report to me should really be focused on the current quarter. I always tell people, sometimes I get, we'll have a good quarterly conference call or something, and Wall Street will like our quarterly results, and people will stop me and say, congratulations on your quarter, and I say, thank you. But what I'm really thinking is, that quarter was baked 3 years ago. Right now, I'm working on a quarter that's going to reveal itself in 2021 sometime. And that's what you need to be doing. You need to be out sort of, 2 or 3 years in advance.
So now that you watch that video, I think you see more of what I mean, right? The calmness, the quiet confidence, the surgical nature of how your approach should look like. Number 4, small seeds lead to big harvest. Every single moment, focus on how you can shift the negative into positive, both internally and externally. Death by 1,000 cuts works both ways. Flywheel effect. So again, go to the Facebook group, right? Look at the people who have achieved massive success through this program. Notice that their stories are the same. They started out in very terrible circumstances where they were the only ones who were trying to save their relationship. They tried for months and months to grow themselves and fight their partner's confirmation bias and undo the damage they've caused. But for the first 3 to 6 months, nothing really seems to be happening. In fact, it might be going backwards, but they stay relentless anyways. Then all of a sudden, they get all the results in one swoop. They farmed for the whole year. Now they can enjoy the harvest. And they can experience the success because they simply spend every single day focusing on how to plant the most and best seeds possible. So don't panic. Don't try to say, what is the perfect thing I can say, the big thing I can say right now to change your mind? How can I make all these changes in 1 week? Don't panic. And also don't panic when changes don't happen in 1 week. Plant seeds. Do the best you can. Learn. Iterate your approach. Plant better seeds. And relax. Just be like this farmer. Just work hard. Then watch your farm grow a bit. Look at the big picture view and go, how can I be more surgical next time? How can I be better next time? Don't panic, guys. Just relax. Plant small seeds every day. Take it 1 day at a time. 4 buckets. Plant seeds in all 4 buckets every single day. Last thing is progress over compassion. Keep your focus on learning how to improve and iterate on the processes every single moment of your life. Grow your intrinsic value and your win will become inevitable. What I mean here is that we took a look at the process of success and how we say we need to admit our mistakes. We need to confront our mistakes. We need to find the antithesis, the issues, the problems, and learn from it. We want feedback, right? Because the real test is going to be with your partner. So if I'm pretty tough on you, if I give you tough love, if other people give you tough love, if people are not giving you the answers on a silver platter, don't take offense to that, right? Progress over compassion. What we really care about is the results, not your feelings. So don't be one of those people who whenever you get feedback, you get defensive, you get offended, right? We're all here to help you learn, to help you become the best, because you're fighting some very intense entropy and confirmation bias right now. You don't have time to play the ego game. All you care about is progress. Because the real test is going to be in your actual life. If you would rather spend your time, waste your time defending yourself, getting offended, getting angry at people in this program for giving you tough love, you're basically saying your ego is more important than your results. Right? Results first, progress first. Don't get offended. We're all here to grow. Now let's take a look at some paradigm shifts on feedback loops and chain reactions. 1. I want you to understand that it doesn't take two to tango. So in any feedback loop, it just takes one to perpetuate or break a negative and positive cycle. It takes one to create a massive chain reaction and one to create exponentiality. In fact, this is actually already happening, but you just don't know it. So right now, what's happening is that what you're doing is already affecting what your partner is doing. You're already creating a feedback loop, but going in a bad direction right now. So for example, you get angry. When you get angry, your partner gets angry. When your partner gets angry, she responds badly. When she responds badly, that makes you angrier. And this goes on. So here, what you do affects what your partner does. You are already powerful. You're just not using your power in a correct way. So it doesn't matter who starts this loop. It can be just one person. The existence of feedback loops and thus chain reactions already exists. Albeit, it's probably been going in a negative direction this whole time, beneath the radar of your consciousness. So right now, already, even today, what you do already affects your partner. And it's been like that for the last, God knows how many years we've been together. But notice here what happens when you begin to learn how to respond in a positive way, both inside and outside. Now, what happens is that when you respond to your partner's bad response with a good response, it breaks the chain. It doesn't make your partner angrier, and it doesn't make you angrier. Right? Now, this feedback loop changing doesn't happen overnight, because again, you have that strong paradox of change and that strong confirmation bias. But you can eventually break the negative loops. So, and when you break it, now you can perpetuate a more positive feedback loop and chain reaction. And this all started with just one person. And you see this happening all the time in the Facebook group, where one person, and this is what the program is built on, is one person can have a lot of power to do massive change. And picture this like a flywheel, right? So a flywheel is this massive wheel that you can turn in one direction or the other. Right? And because this wheel is so big, once you get it going in one direction, it's really hard to stop it and get it going in the other direction. Right? So if what you do, one person can make the feedback loop, the flywheel, spin in a negative direction, which it has been for a very long time, you're damn right that what you do, one person, can make the feedback loop, the flywheel, spin in a positive direction. Damn right. We see it every single day. If you still doubt this, I don't know what program you're taking. It just takes a while to fight the enemy forces. Again, entropy and confirmation bias. Just like how if the wheel here is spinning in the wrong direction, yeah, you can apply opposite force, but it takes a while to get it to stop and then spin the other direction. So it's not going to be overnight. It's not like you say one thing and then, oh my God, my partner magically just changes her ways. So I expect there to be strong resistance at first, just like how there's going to be strong resistance when you're trying to get this flywheel to spin in a different direction. And depending on how much of the wrong momentum, the negative momentum you have. But eventually, as you keep applying the opposite force, you'll begin to gain massive momentum in the positive direction. And you're also the puppet master here. So if the enemy here was your partner's character, then we're kind of screwed. But all of you have a common enemy, and all of you have the same weapons to fight this enemy. And you already have this weapon. So again, the weapon is that you can create positive direction and positive feedback loops and chain reactions. So you can create intense exponentiality in a positive direction by mastering the right layers of the processes and consistently playing them out properly, internally and also externally, to create strong feedback loop and chain reactions. But the enemy you're fighting again is the different layers of entropy and your personal and partner's strong confirmation bias about who you were. And if that's the enemy, if the enemy is entropy and confirmation bias, that's something we can fight. Right? We're not trying to fight your partner. We're trying to fight this thing that is within our control. The weapon is within our control too. That's a good thing. Mastery is also a matter of time. If the right ways to wield the weapon is through your relentless mastery and programming of the various layers to changes, then winning is a matter of when, not if. If you just do the work. If you just do this, you follow the process of success, and you master the 4 buckets, the 3 layers, the 5 pillars, you will master everything. And you are going to know how to wield that weapon, and you're going to fight confirmation bias and entropy. And resistance is meant to be broken. If confirmation bias going in a negative direction can be created, then confirmation bias going in a positive direction can also be created. Right? If your partner can degrade her confirmation bias about you to be negative, sure as hell it can change in a positive way. It means it's changeable in either direction. So understand that the paradox of change that we talk about, the resistance, is meant to be busted through. Now the problem here is that most people do not understand or know the tools to fight through the paradox of change, which is why most people stay stuck in a cycle of self-doubt and eventually giving up. So here, you feel the internal doubt and you feel this resistance for your changes. You get this internal resistance. The doubt shows in the subtle things you do. And when your partner sees this doubt you have, she starts to resist even more, becomes even more suspicious. So this internal resistance creates external resistance. Then, when you get this external resistance, it makes you doubt even more, and so on and so on. This is most people's cycles, and why most people don't change, and why they stay stuck in their cycle of doom forever. But notice here what happens when you begin to learn how to respond in a positive way, both inside and outside. Now, again, it's not going to happen overnight, but you can eventually break the negative loop. What if you chose to believe that resistance is meant to be broken, and you operated from this internal strength? Then your execution becomes more impeccable. Your partner eventually stops resisting and calms down, which makes it easier for you to believe in your new changes. And again, this starts with just one person. Right? And it takes a while, just like the feedback loop, just like the flywheel analogy. It takes a while. Last thing, you being consistent and your grit will lead to massive results. So every single time you feel like your progress is slow, remember the hockey stick effect, that if you continue to be relentless in creating positive loops, your results will come. So again, this slide right here, most people want to give up in that flat period right there, which is why most people never get to experience this spike. But if you look at any of our success stories in our program, including myself even, the pattern looks like the blue. You have to go through that period where nothing really happens if you want to see the harvest. When I was fighting for my relationship, it took me 8 months of solid, relentless work, perfection. And this is not including the time that I was trying to figure out these things by myself, which is a couple of years. And she was resisting me so heavily. For 8 months, I was impeccable. Nothing for 8 months, boom. And in the 8 months before, I was just telling myself, what am I doing? Is it working? All this self-doubt, all these issues. But when I got my results, I said, that was easy, that was fast, right? It would be a shame if we give up in that early period. Same thing for my business. Look, nothing happened for a whole year. Then suddenly, boom, everything just exploded. So add these new paradigms to your bucket too. Right? I want you to have a different paradigm of how you see the world now. So quick recap. You want to create this intense exponentiality in the positive direction by mastering the right layers of processes and playing them out in a consistent way properly, both internally right now and externally later. And you're fighting the different layers of entropy and your personal and partner's strong confirmation bias against who you were. And the way we reverse it, of course, this system. Ultimately, we have to master the 4 buckets. We have to be untethered. We have to grow our bulletproof vest. We have to master the framework so that we can reverse negative loops and chain reactions. Now, I will continue to show you the process in the rest of the program. Here, in phase 1, we gave you a small few bunch of layers to your bucket 2, to your bulletproof vest. In this module, we gave you more layers, and I will show you more layers. I will show you the frameworks and more of the process as we continue in the program. Now it's up to you to do the work. It's up to you to constantly find new ways to consciously identify negative cycles, consciously break it, and consciously perpetuate a more positive one. Especially when things get tough and difficult. But if you choose to take the easy way out during the rough moments, then you're right. You will have no hope. Got no two ways about it. You will have no hope. Remember this. Failures use difficult moments as an excuse to go back to their old ways, to feel demotivated, to take the easy way out and give up. This is why most people can never escape the cycle of failures, because again, you are going to get through those difficult moments because you're fighting entropy and confirmation bias. Whether that's trying to save your relationship, build a business, build your career, you're fighting entropy and confirmation bias. But people who are successful use difficult moments as a reason to go to their new self, as a reason to feel motivated, as a reason to take the hard road and double down. This is why people who are successful can find success despite the odds. People who are failures, they fail because of the bad odds. People find success despite the bad odds. I was born in poverty. I succeed in every area of life despite the odds because I always use difficult moments as a reason to double down. Which one will you choose to be? Last thing again, hope is a terrible strategy, guys. We must take it out of our vocabulary. If we do not take control of the steering wheel, the odds will always lead us further into a state of disorder than order. Things will always get worse if we do not take control. No one is coming to save you, and the stars will most likely not align. It's just not how entropy works. It will work itself out is the greatest and cruelest myth anyone has ever said. So let's fucking go. Right? We built some layers here. Make sure you put into your mental map. We're going to build more layers as we continue. Then later in the phase, we're going to show you how to program these paradigms into your life. That's it on this module. Getting to know your enemies and your weapons. And I'll see you in the next module right now. Thanks, guys.